So we will have the interesting session on rheumatology. Our first speaker will be Dr. Avinash Jain. The second session will be from Dr. Manoj Khatri. So without any delay, we are already late. So I request the credentials of Dr. Avinash Jain you can see on the slides. So without any delay, I request Dr. Avinash Jain to proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again this year. It was a nice experience last year and was looking forward for the meeting. Thank you once again. So after a tinge of inflammation in the last topic during discussion, let's move to proper inflammatory disorders. I'll be touching upon inflammation in the vessel wall, and my friend Manoj will be discussing inflammation in the joints. This is how I have been reading books from school to, it's been almost 16 years before I left Jaipur in 2003, came back after 16 years, having done my MBBS from KMC Manipal and DM from SGPGI, spent some time in UK learning about behavioral medicine and qualitative research. Disclosures, it's pretty risky, so we'll keep a mum there. And this is how I'm going to approach. We will start with clinical features, case-based, diagnostic approach, something that the residents love much more, tests, and we'll end up with classification criteria and the management. So let me throw a question first. This is one figure which we use a lot. It's Chapel Hill classification for vasculitis. Where would you like to place this words small, large, and medium? What do you think? The vessels which are colored in red are small, medium. How many for small for the vessels which are colored in red? Anyone large? Okay. So the capillaries, the venules, and the arterioles, they comprise the small vessels. The aorta and its branches is a large vessel, and something in between is medium. Another way of looking at it is, aorta and its branches, it's pretty simple, straightforward, is large vessel. Once the vessel penetrates a viscera, it becomes medium vessel. As soon as it penetrates any skin, kidney, we call it medium vessel. We will learn why it is important to figure out the distribution and the pattern of the vessels. And then the arterioles, veins, capillaries are the small vessels. And this is the classification which was proposed in 2012 and has been used since then. Just a second, please. Yeah. So the large vessel comprise of Takayasu arteritis and giant cell arteritis. We see more commonly Takayasu arteritis. GCA is rare in India. It's much more common in the Western country. If you look at medium vessel vasculitis, we have to deal with polyarteritis nodosa and Kawasaki disease. And the small vessel vasculitis is divided into two groups. One which is pauci-immune. When I use the word pauci-immune, it means the complements level will be normal here. The C3, C4 that we do in lupus will be normal here because these are pauci-immune. The immune complex deposition is not happening. As compared to the group above, which is mediated by immune complexes. So if you do a biopsy, you will either get IgA deposits like you get in IgA vasculitis. You may get a full house like you get in lupus. And then there is something called as variable vessel, which means it can either involve small, it can involve medium, it can involve large, and hence the term variable vessel has been used for Behçet's and Cogan syndrome. And to complete the list, if you look on your left, there is single organ vasculitis. The name of single organ vasculitis is derived from the organ in which the vasculitis is manifesting. So if it is skin, we call it cutaneous vasculitis. If it is brain, we call it primary CNS vasculitis. If it is only aorta, it could be called as isolated aortitis. And similarly, if there is a systemic disease, this is something which we see more commonly. In a setting of lupus, in a setting of rheumatoid arthritis, a long-standing rheumatoid arthritis, RF-NT-CCP positive, a smoker, another risk factor, they may present to you with gangrene or mononeuropathy multiplex. So these are clubbed under vasculitis associated with systemic disease. And lastly, we have vasculitis associated with probable etiology, which means Hepatitis B may be positive, C may be positive, they may have HIV. We are now seeing post-COVID vasculitis as well, which are affecting medium vessel, large vessel. Lots of cases of gangrene is coming up. We are even seeing thrombosis happening post-COVID or post-COVID vaccine, which are inflammatory in nature and ultimately resulting in some protein manifestations of vasculitis. So let's start with case. The reason why I am using this case-based scenarios is we need to understand the pattern. If we are able to recognize the pattern, we will be able to figure out that we have to think of small or medium or large vessel vasculitis. So we have a 16-year female. She has purpura from 7 days, lower limb predominant. That is, there is predilection of purpuras in the lower limb. She also complains of abdominal pain from 3 days, but there is no melena or blood in stool. Drug history, there was nothing significant, and urine is showing RBCs. I think this must be straightforward. It's not that difficult, yes. So Hinox-Schönlein purpura, which has now been renamed as IgA vasculitis, going by the pathogenesis. So this is nothing but IgA vasculitis. What I need you to remember is, I had shown you a pic of purpura. We will come back to that, why I had shown a pic of purpura. Because purpura tells us the etiology. Purpura tells us what to think of. In patients who have vasculitis, that is small vessel vasculitis, these purpuras are non-blanchable and palpable. Because of the vessel wall inflammation, the RBCs have extravasated. If they have extravasated, they are going to give you some raised feeling, which is called as elevated or palpable. That is what palpable purpura tells us. Let's have another case, 35-year male. He presents to you with 6 months history of joint pain, but currently he has come back with red eyes which are very painful. And urine is also showing 7 to 8 RBCs. What do you think is the diagnosis here? Let's start with the figure. What do you think is happening in the eye? Epi or no epi? So this is scleritis. Because generally episcleritis will give you just discomfort. It won't be that blush red. Scleritis on the other hand will be painful and it's more angry looking. So because there is pain associated with it, so this is scleritis. And scleritis, let me tell you, is a medical emergency in rheumatology. Considered an OPD branch, but there are few emergencies that we deal with, because if you don't take care of scleritis, it is going to penetrate the layers and may result in perforation, which is a complication called as scleromalacia perforans. If the sclera melts, you will start seeing a blue colored sclera beneath. That is a medical emergency. So whenever, if you notice, there were two things happening here. There was eye involvement, there was kidney involvement. Besides that, the patient also had joint pain. So whenever 2 or more organs are involved, you have to think of a systemic disease. Something is happening in the blood which is driving the process. So that is how we think of vasculitis. 2 or more organ involvement is a clue that something is driving it. Think of either infections or vasculitis or other autoimmune disease or even drug for that matter. And we will see the same, some of these stuff in the vasculitic mimics. Another case, this happens in emergency a lot of times, we are very busy. The lady has come with headache, more of occipital, also abdominal pain, it's like abdominal angina. And in emergency, her blood pressure was 162/80. The resident has given her losartan, but after 30 minutes, her BP shoots up. What do you think could have possibly gone wrong here? Why did her BP shoot up after giving losartan? Anyone? Renal artery stenosis? A young female who is coming with hypertension, we have to think of all the causes, including endocrine causes of hypertension. Have to be very careful in using drugs in emergency, right? The reverse also happens. 25-year, coming to emergency, she has blurring, she has dizziness, and BP is not recordable. What happens? What is the knee-jerk reaction? The knee-jerk reaction is, let's start noradrenaline. Patient is also dizzy, there is blurring of vision, definitely there is hypoperfusion, BP record nahi ho raha hai. There still BP is not measurable, you give IV dopamine, again the BP is not recordable, and now the resident is dizzy along with the patient. What do you think is the reason here? The patient otherwise is communicating, is talking. The reason is as simple as that. The limb in which the blood pressure was taken the pulse is not palpable there. Why? Because it's a large vessel disease. And we saw what are large vessels? Aorta and its branches. So radial artery is also a large vessel. Brachial artery is also a large vessel. So when you palpate the radial artery, you realize that the BP, the reason why it is not coming is because it was not palpable. And there was no need for giving noradrenaline. This happens a lot of times. Even during pregnancies when they come and the BP is being measured for the first time, we get a reference saying that BP is not recordable and the patient is, coming really happy, smiling. It's just that we needed to feel the pulses. This we may see more commonly. A classical case of lupus, photosensitive rash. If you look closely, the nasolabial folds are spared, something that happens with lupus, as compared to dermatomyositis, where the nasolabial folds are not spared. She has been having this, grumbling disease activity, and suddenly she comes with left wrist drop followed by right foot drop. What will you think of? Mononeuropathy multiplex. Now what does mononeuropathy multiplex mean? It means that it is a medium vessel vasculitis. So let us see all these terms. We saw scleritis, right? We saw mononeuropathy multiplex. We saw some patients who had urinarium showing RBCs. They may possibly have underlying glomerulonephritis. And then there are certain other patterns which tell us about the kind of vasculitis we are dealing with. I think this is a very important slide. We will, spend some time over here. Small vessel vasculitis, whenever it is there, patient may have uveitis, scleritis. They may have purpura, which is palpable, vesicles, hematuria because of glomerulonephritis, pulmonary vasculitis, splinter hemorrhages. All these manifestations mean that something is happening in the small vessels. So think of small vessel when patient is presenting with these set of symptoms. It will give you an idea. Etiology is a different thing. It will tell you that small vessel is being involved. Whether it is a primary systemic vasculitis or it is secondary or it is due to infection, that's a secondary thing. Whenever there are palpable nodules which are painful, often erythema nodosum, you get a very red, shiny skin in the lower limb. We mistake it as cellulitis, but when we see both the limbs are involved, you have to think of a systemic cause. It's very rare to, to have a widespread cellulitis affecting both the limbs. Livedo reticularis, mononeuropathy multiplex, that's the term that they use now. Gangrene of digits, microaneurysm, something that we see in polyarteritis nodosa. All these mean that it is medium vessel vasculitis. And to complete the list, if you have limb claudication, patient complains of pain on using the limb. Whenever I am combing, I am getting pain. It indicates that large vessel is getting affected. Why? Because the blood supply is not there. Absence of pulses, bruit, aortic dilatation, asymmetrical blood pressure, these all indicate large vessel. So, going back to that slide, the large vessel, you will get discrepancies in BP, bruit, claudication. Small vessels, skin might get involved, kidneys may get involved, eyes may get involved, lungs may get involved. And with medium vessel, you get classically hypertension you may get because of renal microaneurysms, renal infarcts may happen as happens in polyarteritis nodosa. But we should not forget the mimics. This is something, which is most troublesome. Lot of times we get patients who have similar situation and we label them as vasculitis and start them on steroids. Just for example, this 23-year female, skin rash 10 days. Can anyone give me a diagnosis here? What is happening here? And what is happening here? I'll give you a hint. Patient also has fever, weight loss, loss of appetite. These lesions are painful and these are painless. It's an important differential. बहुत बार PO में भी रखते हैं हम infective endocarditis. So these are nothing but Osler nodules. Osler nodule is an immunological phenomena that we see with infective endocarditis. What are the other immunological phenomena? Positive rheumatoid factor, Osler nodule, glomerulonephritis. These are all mediated by immune-based mechanisms. Whereas Janeway lesion, it's a vascular phenomena. Roth spots, they are vascular phenomena. They are painless and macules. They are generally not palpable. Now another case, very interesting case, and this was also presented as a poster. You look at the palate here. There is palatal perforation, right? Patient is also having recurrent sinusitis, nasal stuffiness, along with this palatal perforation. What do you think is the diagnosis? Generally palatal perforation we see with GPA, vasculitis. I am also giving history of recurrent sinusitis that happens with GPA. But when we did the biopsy, it turned out to be NK T cell lymphoma. So whenever these midline lesions are there, you have to be wary of these extranodal lymphomas which can present involving the central structure. These are another very dangerous example of vasculitis mimics, and often these patients, when they present to you, they would have already tried steroid, and if they are not responding, you have to do a tissue diagnosis whenever in doubt. Don't go by serology, don't go by ANCA test. Tissue diagnosis is must in these cases. Now this is again another case which I had been seeing over a long time. She was labeled as GPA for simple reason that she had septal perforation, recurrent sinusitis. Biopsy was showing lots of neutrophils that you see with GPA. CCT PNS was showing atrophic rhinitis with irregular mucosa, and ANCA was positive. I was happy, gave her methotrexate initially because it was a limited GPA kind of thing. Lungs were not involved, kidneys were not involved. We will come to the management part. Then we gave rituximab, but she still continued to have issues. 2 months ago, she developed, complaint of nasal twang, regurgitation of food. One said that, we have not induced her properly. Let's give her rituximab and steroid, really good time this time. The other option is when patients who are on rituximab not responding, let's give them cyclophosphamide. But we collectively decided we need to biopsy her because despite so much of immunosuppression, why her disease is still progressing? And it turned out to be histoplasma. So, we have to be very careful with vasculitis mimics because as you will see, the bacteria can involve any vessel, small, medium, large. The hint probably would lie in a shorter history, more sick looking patient, running fevers, you may get a high procalcitonin, you might not get a classical picture that you get with vasculitis. Some of them may even throw a positive ANCA, they may have renal manifestations. Similarly, viral, it can again affect any vessel. CMV can mimic anything. It can come with, photosensitive rashes, raised OTPTs, CNS vasculitis. So we have to be very careful there, stroke, limb ischemia. So I think the clue probably lies in the shorter history. It's not as easy as I have projected on the slides. Any vessel can be involved and you have to think of these differentials. Fungal again can involve any vessel. It can result in systemic manifestations, nodules, something that we saw in that case, histoplasmosis. And syphilis can involve medium and large vessel. It can result in aorta involvement resulting in stenosis and aneurysms. Not to forget this list, hypermobility. These patients who have hypermobility can be, a part of these spectrum of disorders, Marfan's, vascular Ehlers-Danlos, which is type 4. So it's very important that, if a patient is coming with symptoms suggestive of large vessel, but does not have signs suggestive of inflammation. ESR नहीं बढ़ा हुआ है, CRP normal है, WBC counts normal है, platelet नहीं बढ़े हुए हैं, they are not mounting fever, renal involvement is not seen, that is you are not seeing those features which would suggest small or medium vessel, purpuras नहीं है. You have to think of these non-inflammatory causes of vasculitis, which includes Marfan's. They can all have aortic root dilatation, regurgitation, aneurysms, tortuous vessels. FMD is a very close differential of Takayasu arthritis. Any young female coming with hypertension may have renal involvement. And how do we differentiate? The best way to differentiate this group of non-vasculitis, not inflammatory, is if the imaging shows dissection or arterial tortuosity, you are more likely dealing with these genetic and non-genetic causes of large vessel or medium vessel involvement. But if there is no dissection, no tortuosity, you are more likely dealing with vasculitis. Similarly, the stenotic lesions are more common with vasculitis, but not seen with Marfan's and Ehlers-Danlos, but can be seen with FMD. String of bird appearance has been classically described with FMD, and this is how it looks like. This is the beaded appearance I was talking about in the renal artery. And another clue is generally the ostia or the proximal segment will not be involved. FMD does not involve the proximal segment, the ostia, as compared to Takayasu arthritis, where as soon as the renal artery branch is given off, that will be affected. Look at this dissection here in the aorta, the dissection in the iliac artery. These are all telling us that these are probably non-inflammatory causes of large vessel involvement. And to complete the list, I'm sure you must be seeing more than me these cholesterol emboli, calcified axis, malignancy is another clue, you know, night sweats, a lot of weight loss, you have to think of malignancy presenting like that. But the clue lies where, again, you know, the manifestations are similar. Nodules means medium vessel, livedo reticularis means medium vessel, purpura means small vessel. So if you know that this clinical manifestation is pertaining to a small or medium vessel, you can think of etiology accordingly. Last but not the least, amongst the mimics is drug-induced vasculitis. Hydralazine is very commonly used. Cocaine and levimazole mixture can give PR3 or MPO positivity in almost 100% of the cases. It's very dangerous. Thankfully not seen much in India, but levimazole is being used in pediatric population for nephrotic syndrome. And then minocycline, anti-tubercular drugs, and the latest in fashion is checkpoint inhibitors. All of these drugs more commonly cause small and medium vessel vasculitis. And interestingly, hydralazine can even cause glomerulonephritis, interstitial lung disease, pleural effusion, pericardial effusion, and they may have a positive ANA and ANCA. How to figure out? One way to figure out is temporal correlation. That is, if after starting the drug this has happened, the first thing that we need to do is stop the drug and then see how the disease evolves. If the disease evolves despite stopping the drug, you might have to immunosuppress them. And gradually over time only we will be able to, you know, figure out that it was all drug but nothing else. Coming to the tests and the classification criteria, most of the patients of vasculitis will have cytosis, thrombocytosis, neutrophilia, neutrophilic leukocytosis. Hemoglobin can be normal or can be low because of anemia of chronic disease, or if they have pulmonary hemorrhage, it could be low. If they have GI vasculitis, it could be low. Generally, cytopenias are not seen with vasculitis unless it is CTD associated, which means lupus associated vasculitis. They may have cytopenia, or it is a malignancy mimicking as vasculitis. You have to do a bone marrow, or it could be hepatitis B or C. And a new, not so new, but DADA2 mutation, which is associated with polyarthritis nodosa. They can have cytopenias and classical vasculitis like presentation. Glomerulonephritis will be picked up by looking at RBCs and cellular cast. Proteinuria generally in vasculitis is subnephrotic range. If it is immune complex mediated, it may be nephrotic range. So that also gives you a clue, the amount of proteinuria that you are seeing. Acute phase reactants are generally raised. Now one thing that has changed in last 4 or 5 years is, if you are thinking of small vessel vasculitis, you should order MPO and PR3 by ELISA method first. If it comes out negative, then order ANCA by IFA. This is reverse of lupus and other connective tissue disease, where you should order ANA by IFA first. Why? Because ANA contains more than 100 antigens. So if you just order antibodies there, you will miss the diagnosis. So in case of lupus, Sjogren, you order ANA by IFA first. But in vasculitis, the dictum has changed. You can straight away order MPO and PR3 by ELISA, wherever you are suspecting ANCA vasculitis, small vessel vasculitis. Just straight away order MPO and PR3. By MPO I mean myeloperoxidase, that is the antigen against which the antibody is being found, and PR3 is proteinase 3. And this is the ratio in which these are found in these diseases. Even in patients who has a full-blown classical GPA, 10% might still be negative for PR3. Something similar that you need to keep in mind, infective endocarditis, 10% of them can have MPO positive. But what is interesting is PR3 generally is seen in systemic GPA, that is granulomatous polyangiitis. The other test to complete the list is, if you think of large vessel, you will be ordering an angio, be it MR angio or CT angio. We generally prefer MR angio in large vessel vasculitis because you have to repeat them. So every year you cannot keep on doing CT and expose them to radiation exposure. And ultimately tissue diagnosis is must wherever you are confused, or even in a known case, if you think that that case is not behaving the way you had expected, we have to do a tissue diagnosis. So this is the latest. It came last year only. The classification criteria is easily available on Google. Scoring based system they have done now for diagnosing GPA, eGPA, MPA, all these small vessel vasculitis. What is most important is PR3 has been given the highest score of +5, followed by involvement of the upper respiratory tract, that is nasal involvement. Bloody discharge, nasal clustering gets a score of 3. A score of 5 or more means it is GPA. And look what they have done to the eosinophilic count. If eosinophil counts are high, it could be eGPA, it could be drug-induced vasculitis. So that fetches a score of -4. So you realize so if one symptom and PR3 is positive, you might be able to classify these patients into GPA. Something similar for MPA. However, in MPA, if this is involved, you get a minus score, -3, because this is classically involved in GPA but not MPA. The highest score is given for MPO done by PR3 method, gives you a score of +6. What is the difference between MPA and GPA? Because they both are small vessel vasculitis. How to figure out which are we dealing with MPA, are we dealing with GPA? Because GPA can be more fulminant, they can be more relapsing time, they can be more refractory. So few things that we need to understand is CNS and cardiac involvement is very rare in both the diseases. Nodules is more common with GPA, and what are these nodules? They can cavitate. Often they do not have any symptoms. That is something classical for GPA. They are multiple. They have a slight predilection for the subpleural space because these findings help us to differentiate it from TB. Similarly, you can get pulmonary infiltrates, you can get interstitial lung disease in case of MPO. Renal involvement is more common with MPA. Almost 70 to 90% of patients can get renal involvement in various forms. And to complete the list, there can be episcleritis, scleritis, indicating that it is small vessel vasculitis. There can be parotid enlargement, and this is seen in 50 to 90% of the cases. Fever, weight loss, arthralgia. Mononeuropathy multiplex and polyneuropathies, because see, when we say small vessel, it does not mean that only small vessel will be involved. They can have a spillover and go on to involve the medium vessel. And if the medium vessel is involved, they can come with nodules, they can come with mononeuropathy multiplex. So this is the difference between the two. What you need to remember is ENT and lung involvement are more classical of GPA. ILD is more classical for MPA. Systemic symptoms and renal involvement is more commonly seen with MPA. This is just, so that you have an idea. eGPA also there are classification criteria. Here the eosinophil count more than 1000 are given a score of +5. This is PAN. This is going on since 1990. Long list. Any patient, new onset hypertension, myalgias, weight loss, testicular pain, abdominal angina, renal artery microaneurysm. Think of polyarteritis nodosa. A few minutes on Takayasu arteritis. Again, a new classification criteria has come up. What has changed now is the age has been relaxed. Earlier we used to read 40 or 45. Now it has been relaxed to less than 60. Similarly, there are criteria for Behçet's disease. It's because it's vasculitis, so I just wanted to tell you about it. Oral ulcers is most important. Along with that, they may have genital ulcers, they may have uveitis, and a positive pathology test. Aorta also gives us a lot of information. The kind of aorta which is involved can tell us whether it is small or large. These are the classification for Takayasu arteritis. Type 1, ascending aorta getting involved is type 2A, and so on and so forth. IgG4 classically involves this part of the aorta. They also have various subtypes. IgA vasculitis, this I think everyone knew. Now we will move to management. Another I think 5 minutes I will take. What is most important is how we will treat it. Now small vessel vasculitis is no small, in fact it is more fulminant and can result in high mortality if not treated in time. What is most important is if you think drug is the culprit, stop the drug. And steroids are still the mainstay of therapy, though now new trials are coming where they are trying to decrease the steroids, And this is something which every patient will tell us. Thappad se dar nahi lagta, steroid se lagta hai. Something that what research is also trying, to get away with steroids. You look at these latest articles, they are reaching a dose of 0 mg, no steroid at the end of 24 months. Lot of trials are ongoing, and probably in another 5 years, we might be using very less steroids. For non-severe manifestations of MP and GPA, we use steroid with methotrexate or steroid with rituximab. For severe manifestations, we use rituximab. Rituximab has become a drug of choice, particularly if the patient is PR3 positive or has a relapsing disease. Something similar in maintenance also. For maintenance, at the end of 6 months, we either give rituximab or methotrexate. Refractory cases, make a switch. If you have used rituximab, go to cyclophosphamide or go vice versa. For relapsing disease, you might have to give rituximab every 4 months. Now the biggest challenge probably is how long to give, which is something not very clear yet. And before I come to that, what is important is giving prophylaxis to these patients who are on rituximab and cyclophosphamide. They should be given Septran prophylaxis alternate day. So probably I'll answer next year so that I get an invite again next year, how long we have to give. But to sum it up, generally we give it for 3 to 5 years, the maintenance therapy. The main Ritson trial 3 is looking at how long we should give maintenance therapy in these patients. Takayasu arthritis, we are using lower dose of steroids now. Mark you, 1/3 of the patients do not need treatment. The steroid sparing agents which we use here is methotrexate, azathioprine. Nowadays, Draton, tofacitinib, tocilizumab is also coming. IgA vasculitis, I just want to say, if patient has raised creatinine, high blood pressure, nephrotic range proteinuria, you treat the renal disease. Otherwise, just give them AC inhibitors. The renal disease does not need to be treated. Polyarthritis nodosa, steroids are still mainstay of the therapy. Azathioprine, methotrexate, for severe cases, cyclophosphamide. This is Behçet's, complete list of clinical features driven management. Infliximab is a good drug if there are aneurysms, if there is uveitis which is not responding to conventional drugs. Not to forget vaccinating these patients, and long-term complications are to be kept in mind. These are the drugs which are safe in pregnancy. Something that you need to avoid is methotrexate, leflunomide, mycophenolate and tofacitinib. So let me summarize. What's most important is looking at the pattern, the organs which are involved. That will give you a clue whether it is small, medium or large. Not to forget the mimics. Steroids are still the mainstay, itni padhai karne ke baad bhi, but I think time will change. Rituximab is most important for anti-vasculitis, and cyclophosphamide is another important drug. Not to forget the side effects, monitoring and steroid-free regimen might be a future. This is my department and OPD, and these are the other faculties. So our department is not just handsome but more beautiful too, trying to maintain the gender ratio that we see in autoimmune diseases. Thank you.